Christian parenting.
Aloha, friends. Welcome to the Boy Mom Podcast, powered by Christian Parenting. I am Monica Swanson, mom to 4 boys, podcast host, and author of Boy Mom, What Your Son Needs Most from You. Here on the podcast, it's my goal to bring you practical advice and biblical wisdom for raising boys in this sometimes crazy world. You can always find show notes over at monicaswanson.com/podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Some teenage boys today find porn sites blasé because there's a plethora of nude photos of girls that they actually know in their own age cohort, which is troubling to say the least. But it's happening, and it poses its own set of challenges. And I think the one that most frightens me is that digital is forever. So when you take that photo and you send it out, you don't know where it ends. And I know that kids have made mistakes across millennia, but the cost of mistakes today are higher.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Boy Mom Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope your summer is off to a great start. Now, we were just listening to a short clip from Sean Clifford, who is here to blow your minds. Seriously, my mind was being blown throughout this whole conversation. It is so good. It is so packed. And this is part of a summer series that we're doing here about boys and technology. And if you know me well, you know that I believe in coming at this topic from as many fronts as we can. There's unfortunately not a simple way to keep our kids safe online. So last week we had Kristen Jensen on talking about the brain defense curriculum she has and about her pictures, good pictures, bad pictures, and how important it is that we have conversations with our kids, that we teach them and equip them for being online, for how to have a healthy relationship with technology and what to do when they come across something they didn't mean to or they shouldn't. And so that's one front, but we also have to have internet filters. You've heard me talk about this over the years, blogged about it in my book, but Canopy is a company that Sean Clifford is the CEO of, and they're coming at things in a new way that just is really, really fascinating. Canopy is a parental control app that uses artificial intelligence to block porn in real time, prevents sexting, allows parents to choose what apps and websites their kids use, and tracks device location. So Canopy is doing things that I had never heard of before, and my whole family is super impressed with their technology. And you're going to hear more about it from Sean, but also I hope you'll use the link in show notes to click over and check out what they're up to. You're going to hear more about Canopy this summer. But I think Sean would agree with me. The important thing is that you get a filter on your devices that's working. So depending on your family's needs, your situation, look into your options and just get something on every device in your home. Now, I hope you can listen to this interview to the very end, because some of the things Sean says towards the very end are so encouraging as far as conversations with our kids. I loved it. In fact, this whole interview is just awesome. So I can't wait to share it with you. Without further ado, I'm going to let you just dive in and listen to Sean Clifford and I talking about keeping our kids safe on devices. I hope you enjoy. Hey, Sean, welcome to the Boy Mom Podcast.
Monica, thanks so much for having me.
I am excited for this conversation, and it's such an important conversation, and I just appreciate people like you who are doing such important work in the world. So before we dive in, I've got lots of things that are on a lot of our minds that I want to talk about today. But first, can you just introduce yourself, maybe your family, and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Sean Clifford. I am the father of 4 kids, 1 girl and 3 boys, appropriately. And they are ranging in age from 9, our oldest, all the way down to 2. So girl, boy, boy, boy. I've been married to an amazing woman, Meredith, for almost 14 years now. We're coming up on that now. And for the past 3 years, I've been the CEO of a company called Canopy, which aspires to empower families to navigate this crazy digital world that we live in. And in essence, our very first act is to try and make sure that kids can be online without ever experiencing porn.
Man, that's a high aim in today's world.
Yeah, daunting task, but
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. We appreciate it. And we're going to talk more about that as we go here. But you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of research. You have some information that just has made me really more aware as I've read through some of the information about Canopy and all the things you do. So let's dive in. Let's not waste any time. Let's talk about why parents now. I'm guessing anyone listening, that the boy moms out there listening are aware that porn is an issue, that the internet is a scary place. But let's talk about what's changed more recently. Maybe you can share. Let's dive into what's happened in the last few years. Old porn versus new porn. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And I think it's a great place to start just because, on the one hand, the issue of pornography is age old. You can go back to Plato and
Mhm.
find him talking about it, but something has shifted. And I
Mm,
think at the heart, I mean, there's a few changes. Probably the most notable one is the advent and just rapid adoption of the smartphone, which has just changed a lot. But I want to talk a little bit, as you kind of teed up, the distinction between old porn and new porn. So, old porn was effectively Playboy. And I think this is still what many people think about when they think of porn. It was A, difficult to obtain, B, limited. Maybe there were 15 images per issue. Those images were static, right? It was just a snapshot. It was limited to nudity, which, it's not great, but was tame by modern standards. And lastly, it was
mhm,
embedded in a culture that many people viewed as where pornography was viewed as problematic. So that's kind of the world of Playboy. And we couldn't
mhm,
be in a more different place today. And so, just to kind of follow with those same points, new porn is easily and instantaneously accessible. It offers unending novelty, which is so important. That's the real thing that hijacks the brain.
mhm.
It's
Yep.
much more visually compelling, and by that I mean it's HD videos as opposed to just a static image. And then, the fourth thing is it's graphic, right? It's not just a still shot. It's like very intense and dark, and much more formative and impactful in that sense. And then lastly, our culture is hypersexualized. So
Mhm,
the environment that you're in, where even if you're not looking at pornography, just whether it's the news or what you see on YouTube or basically any venue, we're just much more saturated in these visual images and videos that I think kind of speak to our brain in a more compelling
mhm.
fashion. And so it's everywhere and it's
Yeah.
out there. So
Yep.
the
Yep.
end result of all this is that new porn is much more likely to be alluring, formative, and addictive. And so I try to encourage folks, and sometimes I meet resistance. I hear a lot like, my uncle had a Playboy under his bed, and,
Mhm,
like, I'm
mhm.
not saying that was fine, but, we're in a completely different world now, and I think
Right.
this is really the first time in human history that you've effectively given ten-year-olds access to
Mhm.
everything on the internet.
Mm,
And what
mhm.
I'm sorry, but long-winded, but the last thing I'll say is, I listened to a gentleman who regrettably just passed away, Gary Wilson, but he had a interesting TED Talk in which he said your average, I want to say 15-year-old today will have seen more naked women in a 10-minute span than his ancestors would have in a lifetime. And so just like
Stop. Oh,
it's a new world, not to be a fear monger or scaremonger, but we need to have our eyes wide open to the challenge that it poses today.
no. Wow. That is just frightening. And I told you before we even got on before we hit record that I'm okay with being a scaremonger on this one. And that years ago I told my boys I wanted it to, in their minds, for porn to be right up there with joining a terror organization or smoking crack. I was like, I want you to fear this because I know I have, personally known families whose lives have been destroyed. And this, I mean, I knew people when the internet was still so young that it took going to adult shops, and doing those kind of creepy things that most of us, again, who are older, grew up associating that with just such a negative, dark world. But now it is so accessible that it's becoming normalized, I think. Um,
Hmm.
it's becoming, people kind of joke about it like it's everybody, assuming everybody is looking at porn. And wow. So yeah, I think it's something that is okay to have a little scaremongering, fear mongering is okay with me in this. Okay, so let's then talk a little bit more about kids here. And like you said, 10-year-olds who have devices. What else is going on with kids? You, I know, have talked about sexting. Can you kind of go into some of the other things that some parents aren't even aware that kids are doing?
Yes. So the one that probably garners the most surprise from parents is just the phenomenon of sexting, which is
Hmm.
for any of those that don't yet know is when you take a nude photo of yourself and send it out digitally. And this has been particularly heartbreaking just to observe over the past couple of years. It is becoming much more prevalent. The stats that we had from, gosh, this was maybe 5 years ago, is that 1 out of 4 American teenager had received a sext, and 1 out of 7 had sent one. I haven't seen updated numbers, but they are going up. And over 50% of kids have sent or received one. And then the one that I saw most recently is that 2/3 of American teenage girls had been solicited to send one. And so
Mm,
it is
my
it is
goodness.
a new phenomenon. We can talk a little bit about that. We've actually heard some strange stories about how some teenage boys today find porn sites blasé because there's a plethora of nude photos of girls that they actually know in their own age cohort, which is
Oh my
troubling to say the
goodness.
least. But
Oh,
it's happening, and it poses its own set of challenges. And I think the one that most frightens me is that digital is forever. So when you take
yeah,
that photo and you send
exactly.
it out,
Hmm.
you don't know
Hmm.
where it ends. And um, I know that kids have made mistakes across millennia, but the cost of mistakes today are higher, which I think poses a challenge for parents. Which, I mean, I'll be very frank with you. I hate the term parental control software. We're kind of in that space, but because I don't
Hmm.
want to be controlling. Like I don't want to be the helicopter dad that's always
Hmm.
hovering and monitoring, but at
Hmm.
the same time, I have to recognize that some mistakes today are just more costly than they may have been 15, 20 years ago. So I think that's something that parents are still trying to figure out how they can acknowledge the risks out there, convey and prepare their children, but do it in a way where they still have that healthy relationship, which ultimately is what we want to push forward and
Yeah,
drive on.
man. This is a big issue. Like, I'm just sitting here going, I could see where some parents just feel like, I mean, first of all, we want to put our kids in a bubble and just give them no technology or just give up. Like, is there even hope? One more thing you mentioned here that, again, like, I think most of us are aware of this, but as I was reading through the notes, preparing for this interview, I was like, just again reminded of just the depth of this issue. But kids are darn good hackers, you say. Talk to us about that. Scare us a little more before we move on to some good news.
To the hope, yeah, there is good news coming. The hacker part, and look, I think generally speaking, I think parents feel overwhelmed from 2 different angles. One angle is, like, a lot of this is just new, and they're, like, they don't know how to deal with it. And I think another angle is, oftentimes their kids are more tech savvy than they are. And so there's
Yes,
this,
amen.
feeling of futility. It's like, "Well, I can try this, but they'll just
Uh-huh,
get around it." So, in
exactly.
building Canopy, one of the things that we really wanted to do was, can you build a program that, where we've effectively, to use our lingo, locked the back doors, where there aren't these easy ways? And I'll give you a couple of examples. So, one way that kids traditionally are able to get around other filters is through in-app browsing. So the great example is Google Maps. If you go into Google Maps and you enter in a adult website, sometimes you can actually get their headquarters to pop up, and then you can click the website in Google Maps, and it opens up a browser. So even though there's a filter on, you're able to explore that. And from the filter's perspective, you're just interested into cartography and like spending an
Oh
hour
my goodness.
navigating in Google Maps. So we wanted to make
Okay,
sure
so
that
you're telling me, sorry, I just got to camp out right there and make sure everybody just heard that. So you're saying those of us with filters on our computers, if we've got a kid who wants to find something and doesn't want to be caught, and if they know this, which I'm sure kids spread the word, they can go into an in app browser. So they go into Google Maps, they go into the little URL bar, whatever we call browser, sorry, and they put in what they want to find. And we would not see that on our filter report or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
yes, a lot of the kind of traditional filters operate primarily in a browser. And so they're not able to
Yeah.
capture the in app browsing. So some are getting better at it.
Oh
And so I
my
don't,
goodness.
but that
No, yeah.
historically, that's been one way to get around it, and there are a few others. So, what are the things that we really try to do? We have two guys on my team that mentor college students, and they're familiar with all the other things out there, and so they'll gather them together with Canopy on and say, we'll get a treat or a surprise for the first one that can get around it. And these guys know all the shortcuts, all the back doors, all the things to
Wow.
try. And so far, we haven't done it, which is not to say that anything is perfect.
Wow.
We do not believe in silver bullets, but that was a really important thing for us. Is a filter is only as good as its inability to be circumvented. So that was really important
Right.
for us and for parents as well to kind of give them that peace of mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to be fair, and you acknowledge most of the kids, especially those young 10-year-olds that we talk about, they're not out looking for pornography. Pornography is looking for our kids. Like there is just such a darkness out there that's, trying to find ways to reach our kids and get them entangled as early as possible because that's when addictions begin. So I think that it's fair to say most of our kids aren't out looking for it. Though once teenager stumbles upon it, it is so addictive that that's when oftentimes I can imagine they are trying to find ways to get around whatever mom and dad have set up or whatever mom and dad are aware of. And so whether it's, receiving a surprise, message from a friend that they weren't expecting that pops up in front of their face or whether they're out looking for it, talk to us now about Canopy and what Canopy is doing that's unique and how it can help.
Absolutely. And if you'll indulge me for a second, Monica, I just want to touch briefly on the point that you just raised, which is the stat that jumps out to me is that over 50%, a more majority of kids, American kids, enter middle school having already been exposed to pornography online. And over 60% of them stumbled on it accidentally or it found them.
Yes.
And I
Right.
bring that up because I think that's also a really important distinction, which is critical for parents to know. We at Canopy talk about
Mhm.
the difference between, and if you'll pardon the dry lingo, but type 1 porn and type 2 porn. Type 1
Hmm.
porn is pornography that's like Pornhub, like a centralized website. And if you just don't go there, you're fine. Type 2 porn is the porn that finds you. You could be in a Roblox chat, or you could be on Twitter or Reddit or someplace that is completely acceptable for a kid to be, and someone posts a link or a stray image comes in. And so the net result of that is it doesn't require that you're out actively searching for something. It will find you.
Sure.
And that's
Yes.
that's really
Yes.
critical. And once it does, it starts to some things can't be unseen, um, which is sad. And so that's one of the things we're really excited about our tech. So zooming back to
Yes.
Canopy, at a high
Yeah.
level, Canopy is a digital parenting app that you can download to a smartphone or a tablet or a computer. And our initial act is to try to deliver parents a porn-free internet experience, and not just for parents, really for all families. And we're able to do that leveraging some really incredible technology that was developed in Israel. But I'll walk you through briefly what it does and then how it does, because the how to me is the really exciting. All right, so what we do with Canopy on one of your devices, we effectively scan every single web page that you ever visit in any browser that you want to surf in instantaneously, and are able to identify if any content is pornographic, whether it's text, image, or video, and then we can just seamlessly strip it out. So that's kind of the first thing: is a real time
Incredible.
porn filter that captures things that other filters miss. The second feature that we were really excited about is we can deter sexting. So if you enable the feature, every image captured by a device that's saved to the memory of your device is scanned to see if it contains nudity, or we have another setting here for minimal clothing, like a bikini or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if it is problematic, we then give the child the option to delete it right away and just have an amnesty and make the smart
Mhm.
decision, or to send it to mom for approval. And we
Mhm.
hope that if it's not appropriate, they actually would send it. They would not send it to their parents. Excuse me. And we really think this is a way to try and help them make better informed decisions. So that's kind of the second, the
Yes.
sexting deterrence.
Huge.
And then the
Yep.
third thing is we grant parents the opportunity to decide which apps are right for each child. So you can select which apps on their device have internet access and block the ones that you don't think are age appropriate or maybe they're time wasters. So, a great example
Yeah.
is we've come across a lot of parents that don't want Snapchat. So they'll just cut that off automatically. And others, whether it's a video game or certain social media, they can block that up front. So between those three things, we hopefully curate a much better, healthier, safer internet experience for your kids. So that's kind of what we do. The how I love, in part because it really does leverage world class tech. So part of the problem that we're confronting was exacerbated by technology, and we think this is a redemptive story in which we're using tech to solve it and really serve
Yeah.
families. That's
Love
what
that.
gets up us in the morning. So the tech we have is smart, fast, and precise. So the smart part is we trained artificial intelligence using machine learning to scan images and videos and determine if it contains pornography with 99.7% accuracy. So it's just an algorithm that can you can feed it any number of images or videos and it can make that assessment. The fast part is that we figured out how to do this really, really quickly. So as you browse, it's done in milliseconds. Our video engine can scan an hour-long video in under 3 seconds, just as an example. So the critical part of this is no, everyone wants security, but no one wants to wait a minute to scan each page. So
Right.
by figuring out
Yeah.
how to do it quickly, we're not impacting the overall user experience for the user, which is so important because a kid that has to wait 10 seconds is going to complain. They're going to fight with their
Uh-huh.
parent. No one wants that friction, and
Yeah.
it's just going to be move to
Sure.
the trash. And then the last
Mhm.
thing is the precision part. And this is something that we love, which is let's say you get to a website that has good content and bad content. So,
Mhm.
twitter.com, 19 posts are
Mhm.
totally benign. They're Bitcoin memes or something like that, but you have
Mhm.
one pornographic image. Our
Mhm.
technology can just seamlessly remove that one thing and still serve up all the good. And so the net result of that is you don't have the all or nothing choice. Do you want all of Facebook or none of Facebook? All of Twitter or none of Twitter? So that you can only give them the good. Now, if too much of a page is bad, we'll block the whole thing. Um, and so that we like to think that we're able to bring a scalpel instead of a butcher's cleaver. Do the kind of
Yeah.
the really
So
precise
good.
stuff. So, that's kind of bundle that all together. We think this is a totally radically different approach to what's been tried before. We think it's as dynamic as the internet itself. And we hope that this really gives kids the freedom that they want and parents the peace of mind that they want. So that's Canopy in a nutshell.
Okay, well, I love everything that you're telling me. And, having a son who's studying data analytics in college, he just finished an artificial intelligence class. And so our family's talking a lot about this and how this is the way of the future. And so I love that Canopy is using technology to solve a technology problem. I love everything that you're doing. It is really mind boggling to me that you're even able to do all of this. So it's super cool.
Mm.
But one thing we want to talk about, because this was kind of eye opening to me, is to realize that there are apps on phones, on devices that no technology can go inside of, right? So let's talk about that and then what we can do as parents in light of that. So can you talk to us a little bit about working within apps?
Absolutely. One of the things that we really aspire to do at Canopy is empower parents. And so that means we need to provide them a tool and we also need to know where the tool ends and steps that they can take at that stage. So I think what you're alluding to is we filter all web browsers and we filter all in app browsers, but there's some in app content that we can't filter. So the example here is Twitter. Twitter uses peer to peer encryption. And so we're not able to filter the Twitter app, but we can filter Twitter within a browser. So what a lot of our parents do is that they will opt to block the Twitter app, but enable their kids to experience Twitter in the browser. And so, for most apps, the experience is on par. Sometimes there's a little bit less functionality, but on the whole, parents, I think, when they're assessing the trade offs, come to the conclusion that for this extra bit of safety and peace of mind that we get, we're still giving you a lot of freedom. And so that's how most of our parents do it. But it's important to know that there are apps that we can't filter within, and when that happens, we always give the parent the chance to block the apps and then use the website version.
Totally. Oh, that's so important because really, I think, we're busy as parents, and sometimes we'll get a filter and be like, okay, we're all covered now. And I know when I first got filters on our devices, I just felt this, false sense of security, I think. And when my husband and I were like, wait, our boys have Instagram, people can send a direct message in Instagram and a filter can't get in there. So I think it's important for parents to just be aware of that. And like you said, you can also use Instagram.com. I know that's a great solution. And of course, kids are going to rather be on a phone or on a device looking at the Instagram app. But listen, if as parents, we tell them, listen, you can either look at it on the computer and have it or forget it, don't have it at all. I mean, I think kids are going to appreciate just the opportunity to use it at all. And so this comes down to just some really tough calls as parents, but our kids are so worth it. And when you take this stuff seriously and you realize the ramifications, the potential dangers, it is so worth it to make some hard choices. And so we can go to Instagram.com. Our kids can see everything. And I think, Sean, you said you can even upload photos in Instagram on a computer, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's a lot you can do without being in the Instagram or the Twitter or whatever app. So I say, though this is hard, though kids may give some pushback, if the option is you either use it this way or you don't use it at all, hopefully kids are going to see that, we're just looking out for their safety. And these are some tough calls as parents, but it can make a world of difference for our kids' future if you're on your game.
And Monica, if I could just jump in, I think you raised a really important point, which is parents should expect resistance. And that's hard. And I know oftentimes you feel overwhelmed and you're trying to figure out where to deploy like what fights you want to have, what's actually worth
Yeah,
it.
right.
And I empathize with that. My kids are still young, but I go through my own exercise on that. But I think this is one area where adopting safeguards now will result in your kids thanking you later.
Amen.
And I know that it's easy for me to say that. I can tell you about the anecdotes or I can tell you about the data. The data is regrettably sad, right? That
Hmm.
smartphones, when kids spend a lot of time on it from an early age, does not result in happiness. And in fact, the correlation is with depression.
Yep.
So, you know, over a third of American teenagers report being severely or moderately depressed. And that's gone up meaningfully over the past couple of years. And we think there's a interesting professor out there, Dr. Jean Twenge. She wrote a book called
Hmm.
iGen,
Yep.
and she thinks so much of this is tied to their smartphones, that they love their phones, but their phones aren't making them happy. In the same way that endless sugar, which is very alluring, is going to give you a stomach
Right.
ache. And
Yes.
so, with respect to limits in general, but particularly with respect to the type of content that's going to shape your understanding of love and intimacy and healthy relationships, we think that you need to give your kids the space to develop on their own and to be kids a little bit longer and then to form those healthy understandings. So, I know it's hard. We're not pretending that this is easy. There will be discussions as you constantly try and find that balance, but we do think this is something that your kids will thank you for later.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And you already mentioned, that this is the first generation of, I guess, they're digital natives, right? Kids who are growing up with devices and smartphones and technology, and we are the digital immigrants. And so I think that for us it's hard to say no to things that our kids love, but later I think next generations hopefully will be more aware. And so if we can make that tough call, I think we're going to be really glad we did later. And I agree with you. My college boys already thank me for the limits that I have set for them. So thank you for that. Okay, so this interview is kind of part of a summer series I'm doing talking about technology. And I think you agree with me that there's so many different fronts we can come in on. We want to prepare our kids just to have a healthy relationship with technology in general. And we're going to be talking about video games and how we can navigate that. And there's so many different things. But can you now just touch on some of the guidelines you suggest for raising boys, healthy boys, in light of the challenges of porn?
Absolutely. So I'll walk through kind of four thoughts. The first is you need to prepare your kids. And I know that you had a session with Kirsten Jensen, the author of
Mm-hmm.
Good
Yes.
Pictures, Bad Pictures, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. And her counsel is prepare your kids, have not one conversation, have lots of conversations. Number one. Number two, always be open to a conversation. You need your kids to know that if they encounter something that makes them uncomfortable, if they see a bad picture, that you are not going to be angry, that they can come talk to you and have a conversation. I think kind of the third part of the preparation is tell them that it's okay to be different. We in our
Mm,
family, I want my kids, we say Cliffords are different. There's some things that are
mm.
just not for us. Like, and I want them to develop a tolerance and comfort level with that. So as they venture into the world, they'll be fine saying, okay, that's for you, that's not for me, and have the confidence to do that. Okay, so that's on the
Love
preparation
that.
side. Then there's the protection side. Again, I don't want to sound self serving, but you have to put a good filter on their devices. Some content isn't for kids, some content's not for adults, frankly, but this content finds them. And you have to give your kids a fighting chance to be a kid and to have the space, as I just said, to develop a healthy understanding of relationships and love. So make sure that your kid does not have a very alluring, tempting, and toxic thing always accessible at any time right on them. It just, we wouldn't do that with anything else in life. And
No.
yet, for some reason, we've done it here. So make sure
Yes.
there's a guardrail. Next part of protect them is bound your device in time and place. And by this, I mean your your children's devices, your device, frankly, should have a bedtime, and it should be a bedtime before you go to bed, and it should wake up after you. It's great advice from this wonderful book, The Tech Wise Family by Andy Crouch.
Yeah, I love that.
And it should also be bound in place. We have a rule in our own home. It's no devices in the bedroom ever. It's just not something that we do.
Wow.
No devices at the dinner table ever. When I come in the house, I put my phone in a basket. If I need to check it, I'll go to the basket. But I want to set, my kids are still young now, but we want that to be the norm, that devices have a place. Okay, so that's to protect them.
I love that.
Third, provide an example. Don't always be on the phone. And I think this is, we need to guide the hearts and minds of our kids to want something more than instant gratification and titillation. And there's a haunting provision from Andy Crouch's book in which he said when the iPhone turned 10, that meant there was a generation of 10-year-olds in America who had spent their entire life competing with the iPhone for their parents' attention and oftentimes losing, which just
Okay, that breaks my
break.
heart.
I know it's a devastating, and I think part of it's devastating because it rings true, and we
Yeah.
can see this. So set
Mhm.
that example for them, and I think kind of the second part here is find a tribe to do life with. And so if you're going to set guardrails, if you are going to try and live well with technology, which is to say not let it run you, but have it actually serve you, it's so much easier if you as a family, but especially your kids have peers that are also living that way. And so there's some great organizations out there. Wait Until Eighth is one example, but find other families that will do this so your kid does not feel like they are isolated and left out. And then the fourth thing, which I think you, Monica, have done a great job of, is replace the void with something good. So you talk a
Mm.
lot about adventure. Like you
Mhm.
want your kids to love real adventures, not the adventure you
Mm.
find on a screen, but a real
Mhm.
adventure. And so I think this looks differently as your kids age, but when they're young, they crave your attention. So spend that time with them. When they're a little bit older, gift them actual adventures. Like, hey, we're not going to get you a phone this year, even though some of your friends have one, but instead, we're going to do this crazy thing together. And so when
Mm.
they think about that loss, they actually, it's paired with something good that they're doing instead. And then as they get older, when they really want to spend time with their peers, curate that. Make it so that they can have real fun with their friends that's not mediated by a screen. But making sure, like, recognizing that the norm is moving towards screen times, like, do something better, make it more compelling for them.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I think that's hard. All these things are hard. So I say all this with empathy and humility, and we strike out more than we succeed in my household. But
Mhm.
my kids, I think, notice that we're trying and we're trying to do
Yeah.
something different. And I think that will count for a lot.
Oh, that is all so good. So good. And I love that. And I think that too can go with the whole thing of, being okay being different and almost giving them that sense of confidence and pride, a good kind of pride that says you do cool things, like own it, enjoy it, be proud of who you are, and that you don't have to buy into what everybody else is doing. And I think there's a from my experience raising boys, I've got, 2 young adults and a 17-year-old before I also have the 10-year-old coming up. But I know that there's a couple years where it's really hard because kids have that strong, strong desire to do what other people are doing. But then they kind of come through it and then suddenly they have new eyes to see. So I encourage parents to hang in there through those tough years because later they're really stoked that they have something special that, because they said no to certain things. So, Sean, thank you. I love all of that so much.
And Monica, if I could share just one final thought on this, we have found, how do you convince a 17-year-old to do something different in this domain, whether it's technology or whether it's an addictive type of content like pornography?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of ways. And again, we really think, look, if you can protect them from that, that's critical. If you can help them learn to love something higher, better, that's incredibly important. But those things can be hard. I think one thing that kind of resonates with the current crop of teenagers in our experience is to let them know that a lot of these devices and a lot of the content that is out there has been designed to be addictive and manipulative. It is actively trying to get them to do something that they probably
Mm-hmm.
otherwise wouldn't do.
Yep.
And I think right now there's a vibe where I don't want to be controlled. I'm my own person. I'm going to make up, that
Mm-hmm.
independent streak
Yeah.
that teenagers get.
Yes.
Lean into that. Fine. If you
Lean
want to
into
be
that.
independent, like great.
Yeah.
Know that this is designed to get you to do
Oh,
what they want you to do.
so
And
true.
removing the scale from their eyes on that, we have found kind of lets them look at the device. It's like, gosh, why did I spend, 2 hours? Am I really, because it was designed by a team of neuroscientists
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, to keep you there. So we have found that's
Right.
kind
So
of
kind of
a
play into
helpful
that.
framing.
Yeah, that kind of rebellious spirit.
Right.
Let them get mad at the right people.
Right.
Oh, that is super solid. Yeah, my teenagers watched The Social Dilemma, and I think that really empowered them to want to make some big choices for themselves. So, wow. Well, thank you. Okay, so if people want to go check out Canopy, where can they find out more? Tell us where to go.
You can check out our website at canopy.us. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. And look, our hope is to really empower parents. We think by providing a tool, we can do some important things and really give them a chance to fight back. And we also hope to provide resources. As you've spoken about, Monica, the old playbooks, the old ways that we approach this sometimes just aren't relevant given the realities of technology. And so figuring out how we can, as parents, do well by our kids in this strange new digital landscape is challenging. And I think you've done an incredible job curating advice and guidance for them. And that's an area where we also hope to kind of help them out by just helping shed light on the challenges that are out there and the potential steps they can take to get through this sometimes exhausting, tiring, challenging,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately very worthwhile phase. When we think
Totally.
parenting is it's a privilege. So
It is. It is. Sean, thank you so much. I just love your heart. I know that you have a heart for your own family and for community and what it means to encourage each other as parents and to, really join forces together. So I couldn't appreciate you anymore. I just thank you for your time. And we'll be putting links to Canopy in show notes, and we'll be talking more about Canopy in future episodes as well. So thank you so much.
thank you.
All right, you take care. Aloha. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you had some eye opening moments, but also that you feel encouraged and hopeful that there is help out there. There are good people doing a whole lot to try to protect our families, and I'm so grateful. So go over to show notes. I've got some really helpful notes that Sean sent me. So grab those and also the link over to Canopy. And I hope you can share this episode with your friends. I think what we talked about was super important. I want as many families to hear what Sean had to say as possible. Now, guys, I am so excited about the rest of summer. We have such a great lineup. And next week, we are going to be talking about video games. And here is a big plot twist. We're going to be talking to a mom who is a gamer. That's right. I enjoyed this conversation so much. I was surprised and refreshed. And I think that if you've got kids who love video games, this might be a really good one for you to listen to. This is one of my all-time favorite interviews, actually. And it surprised me because, I'm all about no video games, limit video games. Well, I'm still there, but I think she had some really interesting things to share. And part of what she shared was amazing guidelines and resources and places to go so that you can make really good choices without having to do all the homework. She did it for you, and she's giving us a really helpful download that you can grab and use to help you navigate the waters of video games. So next week's huge. Spread the word. And then we've got even more ahead in the weeks to come. So I hope you keep enjoying summer. Be in touch with me anytime. You can always email me at aloha@monicaswanson.com. Hopefully we're already connected on Instagram, but you can always find me at monicaswanson_. And as this comes out, I will be wrapping up my time in California with my husband and my son, Luke. So come follow along on our adventures and say hi over there, okay? So guys, thanks again for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, aloha.